August 17th, 1998. The Russian Ministry of Finance, Moscow, a 36-year-old deputy finance minister named Mikhail Kasyanov, is holding a document that no senior official in any major economy wants to hold. It is a default notice. Russia is declaring that it cannot service its GKO obligations. The short-term ruble-denominated treasury bills that have been financing the Russian state for 3 years at interest rates that were always unsustainable and are now impossible. The announcement is 3 pages. The substance is 1 sentence. Russia is broke. What makes this remarkable is not that Russia defaulted. Sovereign defaults happen. What makes it remarkable is that everyone in the room already knew it was coming. The IMF knew. Western banks knew. The hedge funds that had been buying GKOs at 150% annualized yields knew. The yield was the signal. Nobody pays 150% interest on a 2-month treasury bill unless they are running out of options. The market was not surprised by August 17th. The market had been pricing default for months. It was just waiting for the announcement to confirm what the arithmetic had already told it. The default was already priced in before it was declared. China's equivalent arithmetic is sitting in plain sight in 2025. Not in its sovereign debt. China is not Russia, but in the specific asset class that has become China's financial system's GKO, the thing everyone in the room can see, but nobody wants to be the first to call by its correct name. Stay with me. To understand Russia's 1998 default, you need to understand the specific trap the GKO market built over 3 years, because the trap was visible in the numbers long before the announcement. Russia emerged from the Soviet collapse in 1991 with an economy that needed rebuilding and a government that needed financing. The obvious mechanism was government bonds. Russia issued GKOs, short-term treasury bills, rolling over every few months, priced at whatever yield was required to attract buyers. The yields were high from the start. Russia's credit risk was real. Inflation was running. Political stability was questionable. Investors demanded compensation for the risk. The government paid it. Because the alternative, not being able to borrow, was worse than paying 30%, then 60%, then 100%, then 150%. This is the specific trap. When you borrow at rates above your nominal economic growth, the debt compounds faster than your ability to service it. Every rollover at 100% doubles the obligation every 12 months. Every rollover at 150% makes the math worse faster than any real economy can grow its way out of. By 1998, Russia's GKO obligations were rolling over at rates that consumed more than half of all federal revenue just in interest payments. The IMF provided a $22.6 billion bailout in July 1998. It delayed the default by 3 weeks. The arithmetic didn't change. On August 17th, Russia stopped paying. The sequence produced the ruble's devaluation, the collapse of long-term capital management, and a global financial contagion that took months to contain. The default was not the cause of the crisis. It was the acknowledgement of an arithmetic that had been running for 3 years. Now here is China, and the parallel is not in sovereign debt. China has no GKO problem. The parallel is in the asset class that has been performing the same function the GKO performed in 1990s Russia, providing yield to investors at rates that imply a risk level the official narrative refuses to acknowledge, rolling over continuously, building a liability structure whose arithmetic everyone inside the system can see and nobody wants to be the first to call. That asset class is China's trust products and wealth management products, the shadow banking instruments that Chinese households and institutional investors have been buying for over a decade as higher-yielding alternatives to bank deposits. Trust products typically paid 7 to 10% annually, in an environment where bank deposits paid 2 and 3%. The spread was the attraction. The spread was also the signal. What explains the 7 to 10% yield? Either the underlying assets, real estate loans, local government financing, vehicle debt, corporate lending, generated genuine returns justifying that level, or the yield was being paid by rolling the products forward, funding early investor redemptions with new investor capital, maintaining the appearance of performance while the underlying portfolio deteriorated. The second explanation became the obvious one after 2021. Property developer defaults began exposing the collateral behind trust product loan books. LGFV revenue collapsed as land sale proceeds dried up. The yield that had been paid from genuine returns began being paid from structural deterioration, masked by continuous rollover. Now here's the critical part. Russia's GKO market sent a specific signal before the default. The yield rose, not gradually, rapidly, from 30% to 60% to 100% to 150% in the 18 months before August 1998. The yield was the arithmetic. Anyone watching the yield was watching the default probability being priced in real time. China's trust product market sent the equivalent signal starting in 2022. Not through published yield data. The products are not exchange traded with transparent pricing. Through failure rates. through the frequency with which products that were supposed to redeem at par failed to do so, through the rate at which new issuance dried up as investors lost confidence in the rollover mechanism. Zhongrong International Trust, one of China's largest trust companies managing over 600 billion yuan in assets, suspended payments on dozens of products in August 2023. It did not announce a default, it announced a delay in payment. The delay became the default. Zhongrong's parent company, Zhongji Enterprise Group, filed for bankruptcy in January 2024 with estimated liabilities of 420 to 460 billion yuan against assets that could not be independently verified. This is Russia's GKO arithmetic running inside a corporate shadow banking structure rather than a sovereign treasury. The yield was the signal. The failure rate is the signal. Both say the same thing. The default is already priced in. The announcement is just confirming what the arithmetic told you first. Here is the scale dimension that connects the Zhongrong failure to the broader Chinese financial system. Russia's GKO market was approximately $70 billion at the time of default, large enough to be systemically significant for Russia, not large enough to threaten the global financial system independently. China's wealth management and trust product market is estimated at roughly 20 to 25 trillion yuan, approximately $3 trillion in outstanding obligations. The institutions holding these products are not primarily foreign hedge funds. They are Chinese households, Chinese corporations, and Chinese institutional investors whose savings are concentrated in these instruments at exactly the moment the instruments are revealing that the underlying assets cannot support the promised returns. The failure is not hitting foreign investors first. It is hitting the domestic savings base. This is structurally more destabilizing than Russia's 1998 default in one specific way. Russia's GKO holders were primarily foreign. Their losses were real but geographically contained. China's trust product losses are falling on domestic savers, on the same middle-class Chinese households that already absorbed 20-30% declines in property values since 2021. Two simultaneous asset class failures hitting the same savings base is not a manageable sectoral adjustment. It is a broad-based household wealth destruction event. And broad-based household wealth destruction events produce demand contractions that no monetary policy can easily offset. Here is the global contagion dimension, because Russia's 1998 default spread far beyond Russia. Russia defaulted on $40 billion in domestic ruble debt. Long-Term Capital Management, a $125 billion hedge fund whose model said Russian default was essentially impossible, lost $4.6 billion in 6 weeks. The Federal Reserve organized a private bailout because LTCM's failure would have produced counterparty losses at every major Wall Street institution simultaneously. A $40 billion domestic default nearly broke a $125 billion hedge fund and required Federal Reserve coordination to prevent systemic contagion. The leverage ratio inside the global financial system made a manageable absolute number into a systemic threat. China's trust and wealth management product market is $3 trillion. The leverage ratio inside the modern global financial system is not smaller than it was in 1998. It is larger. The derivatives exposure, connecting every major financial institution to every other major financial institution, has grown by orders of magnitude, since LTCM demonstrated what leverage does to contagion speed. A $3 trillion shadow banking failure inside the second largest economy on Earth does not produce the same contagion as Russia's $40 billion domestic default. It produces something larger, not because the absolute numbers are obviously catastrophic. Because the leverage connecting Chinese shadow banking exposures to Western institutional portfolios is not publicly visible in the way that would allow confident assessment of the contagion path before it runs. LTCM's counterparties didn't know how exposed they were until the loss was already happening. The same dynamic applies to whatever global institution holds the Chinese trust product, equivalent on a basis that won't become visible until the failure rate reaches a threshold nobody has cleanly defined. Here is what the default, already priced in, actually means for investors, savers, and anyone with exposure to Chinese financial assets. Russia's GKO yield of 150% was the market pricing an 80-90% probability of default over a 12-month horizon. The market was right. The yield was not an opportunity. It was a warning. Chinese trust products stopped being offered at their historical 7-10% yields in 2022 and 2023. New issuance dried up. The product category that had absorbed trillions in Chinese household savings became unavailable, not because regulators banned it, but because the implicit guarantee that had supported investor confidence was no longer credible. When a product category that was priced at 7 to 10% stops clearing, when investors who would normally chase that yield decline to buy, the market is pricing in default risk that the official numbers have not yet acknowledged. This is exactly the GKO market in early 1998. The yield was high enough to imply default. The market stopped absorbing new issuance at any yield. The arithmetic forced the announcement. China's trust product market is at that stage. The issuance has dried up. The failures are accumulating. The announcement, whatever form it takes in an economy where direct sovereign default is not the mechanism, is pricing itself in the same way the GKO default priced itself in the 18 months before Kasyanov held his 3-page document. This channel exists to read the yield before the announcement. Mikhail Kasyanov did not create Russia's 1998 default. He announced one that the arithmetic had made inevitable 18 months earlier. The 150% GKO yield was the announcement, written in numbers rather than press releases. The August 17th document was a formality. China's trust product failure rate is the equivalent yield signal. The arithmetic behind it has been running since 2021. The formal announcement, however it arrives, in whatever institutional language is appropriate for a state-managed economy, will confirm what the failure rate has been saying. The default is already priced in. The question is who is holding the exposure when the pricing becomes official. Subscribe if you want to keep watching the failure rate before the announcement. And I want your argument in the comments. Russia's 1998 default was accelerated by the IMF bailout. The $22.6 billion package bought 3 weeks and made the eventual default larger by allowing more rollover before the inevitable stop. Is China's government absorption of failing trust products and LGFV obligations making the eventual acknowledgement larger, the same way the IMF's July 1998 bailout made Russia's August 1998 default larger? Drop your argument below. The clearest one gets pinned.